The Grand Council Hall on Nexus Prime had never felt so empty. Thousands of seats filled with representatives from hundreds of worlds, yet something was missing. High Chancellor Morden looked across the vast chamber and his eyes stopped at a section that had been busy just months ago. Now those seats sat empty, gathering dust. The human section. Counselor Vexithara shifted in her seat, her blue skin rippling with concern. She remembered when Ambassador Jiwan had sat there, always ready with questions that made everyone think differently. The human woman had a way of asking simple things that revealed big problems. Now she was gone, along with every other human in the galaxy. The motion passes, Chancellor Morden announced, his voice echoing in the hall. Trade Route 7 will remain under Centaurian control. The vote had been easy, too easy. There were no unexpected questions, no strange ideas, no one pointing out problems that others had missed. The humans had always done that. They would raise their hands and ask things like, "What about the small traders?" Or, "Did anyone check if this helps the border worlds?" Those questions had been annoying. They slowed things down. They made simple votes become long discussions. But now, without them, everything felt too quiet. After the meeting, Vexithara walked through the empty corridors of the human quarter. 3 months ago, these halls had been full of life. Human children had played in the parks while their parents worked in offices and labs. Human restaurants had served strange food that somehow tasted good. Human artists had painted murals that showed impossible things that made people smile. Now it was all empty. Clean, but empty. She stopped at what used to be Ambassador Jiwan's office. A small data pad sat on the desk, left behind on purpose. Vexithara picked it up and played the message again. She had watched it 50 times, but it still gave her chills. Jiwan's face appeared on the screen. She looked tired but calm. Her dark hair was pulled back and she wore the simple blue uniform that human diplomats always wore. "My friends," Jiwan began, and Vexithara felt a pang in her chest. Even leaving, the human called them friends. "We have made a difficult choice. After long thought, humanity will be leaving the Galactic Council. Not in anger, not in fear, but in hope." The recording showed Jiwan pausing, looking directly at the camera. "We came to the stars 150 years ago with dreams of joining something greater. We found you and we have learned so much. We have grown, and we hope we have helped you grow too." Vexithara remembered the first human ship that had arrived at Nexus Prime. The galaxy had been shocked. Here was a new species, young and strange, asking to join the council. Most members had voted against it. The humans were too emotional, too unpredictable, too different, but somehow the vote had passed. "We see now that our way of thinking causes stress," Jiwan continued in the recording. "We asked too many questions. We changed too many things. We disturbed the peace you have built over thousands of years. This was never our intention." That was the problem, Vexithara thought. The humans never intended to cause trouble, but they did. Not bad trouble, but the kind of trouble that made people uncomfortable. They would look at something that had worked the same way for centuries and say, "What if we tried this instead?" Sometimes their ideas were wrong, but sometimes they were right, and that was even more unsettling. "We will not be the source of discord among our friends," Jiwan said, "so we choose to leave. We take with us only what we brought, and we go with love in our hearts for all of you." The recording showed Jiwan smiling, that strange human expression that showed both happiness and sadness at the same time. "We hope you find the peace and harmony you seek. We hope the galaxy prospers. We hope someday our paths might cross again under better circumstances." The message ended with Jiwan bowing in the human way, a sign of respect. Then the screen went dark. Vexithara put the data pad down and looked out the window. In the distance, she could see the docking bays where human ships used to come and go. The bays were empty now, but she remembered the last day. There had been no angry speeches, no demands, no threats. The humans had simply packed their things and left. They had paid all their debts, finished all their projects, and handed over their duties to others. They had been so quiet about it that some council members didn't even know they were leaving until the ships were gone. Captain Minho had commanded the last human ship to leave, Nexus Prime. Vexithara had watched from the observation deck as his massive colony ship. The new soul had slowly moved away from the station. Other human ships had joined it, forming a long line that stretched across the starfield. The exodus had taken 3 days. Ship after ship had left human colonies across the galaxy, gathering into a great fleet. There were colony ships carrying families, cargo ships carrying supplies, and science ships carrying all their research. Even the human exploration vessels that had been mapping the outer rim had been called home. Where were they going? No one knew. The humans had filed no flight plans, sent no messages about their destination. They had simply pointed their ships toward the edge of the galaxy and disappeared into the dark space beyond. Good riddance, Chancellor Morden had said at the time. Finally, we can get back to proper governance. Many council members had agreed. The humans had been a constant source of complications. They questioned everything, suggested changes to systems that had worked for millennia, and always seemed to be in the middle of every dispute, trying to help both sides understand each other. But now, 3 months later, Vexithara was not so sure. Things were certainly quieter without the humans. Meetings were shorter, votes were quicker, and there were fewer arguments. But something felt wrong. She walked to her own office and sat at her desk. A report was waiting for her about trade disputes in the Outer Rim. Before, she would have sent it to Ambassador Jiwan, who had a talent for finding solutions that made everyone happy. Now she would have to handle it herself, and she already knew it would end with angry words and hard feelings. Outside her window, the stars looked the same as always. But somehow they seemed a little dimmer now. The galaxy was certainly more peaceful without humanity. The question that was beginning to worry Vexithara was whether peace was worth what they had lost. As she started reading the trade report, she found herself wondering what Jiwan would have asked about it. What simple question would the human ambassador have posed that would have made everyone see the problem differently? She would never know. The humans were gone, disappeared into the void between galaxies, taking their questions and their complications with them. The Galactic Council finally had the peace it had always wanted. Time would tell what that peace was really worth. The war alarm screamed through the halls of Nexus Prime. High Chancellor Morden rushed to the command center, his ceremonial robes flapping behind him. Red lights flashed on every wall and the air buzzed with panic. "Report," he demanded as he burst through the doors. Commander Zalthor, the military chief, stood before a massive star map, covered in angry red markers. "The Vegan Empire has attacked 3 of our worlds simultaneously. Kepler 9, Ross 128, and Wolf 359. They hit all 3 at the same time with everything they had." Morden stared at the map. The Vegan Empire had been quiet for decades, staying in their own space on the far side of the galaxy. "How many ships did they send?" "That's the strange part," Zalthor said, his tentacles writhing with confusion. "They didn't send more ships than usual. Maybe even fewer. But their tactics, they're completely different from anything we've seen before." The Chancellor frowned. "Different how?" "They're using hit-and-run attacks, sir. Small groups of ships appear, strike quickly, and disappear before our forces can respond. They're not trying to hold ground or establish control. They just attack and vanish." On the screen, reports flashed from the 3 attacked worlds. The pattern was the same everywhere. Vegan ships would appear suddenly, attack military targets and infrastructure, then disappear before the Council fleets could arrive. When the Council ships did arrive, they found nothing but damage and confusion. "This makes no sense," Morden muttered. "The Vegas have never fought like this. They're direct fighters. They mass their fleets and attack head-on. This is—" He stopped. Something cold was growing in his stomach. "This is what?" Zalthor asked. "This is how humans fought," Morden whispered. The command center fell silent. Everyone remembered the war games the humans had participated in. Captain Siak, their military advisor, had always used tactics like this. He would divide his forces into small groups, strike multiple targets at once, and disappear before the enemy could react. The council officers had called his methods dishonorable and cowardly, but they had worked. Every time. "Get me Captain Siak," Morden ordered, then remembered. "No, wait. He's gone." They're all gone. The attacks continued for 3 days. Every time council fleets arrived to defend a world, the Vegas were already gone, having moved on to strike somewhere else. The rigid council military doctrine, which had kept peace for 1,000 years, was completely useless against this new enemy. But it wasn't new. It was exactly what Commander Siak had been trying to teach them for years. While the military situation grew worse, other problems were emerging across the galaxy. On Proxima 7, the atmosphere recycling systems were failing. The planet's government sent desperate messages to the Council, begging for help. Dr. Hyun had designed those systems. The human scientist had spent 5 years on Proxima 7, working with the local engineers to build recycling plants that could handle the planet's toxic air. Her bioremediation technology had turned a dying world into a garden. But now, without her maintenance protocols, the plants were breaking down. The local engineers had the basic knowledge to keep them running, but they didn't understand the deeper principles behind Dr. Hyun's work. They were fixing problems without understanding why they happened. "The bacteria cultures are dying," reported the Proxima 7 governor in a panicked transmission. "We don't know why. They were stable for 10 years and now they're just dying." Council scientists studied Dr. Hyun's research files, trying to understand what was going wrong. But her notes were full of intuitive leaps and experimental procedures that made sense to her, but seemed random to others. She had a way of seeing biological systems as living puzzles, finding solutions that worked even when no one understood exactly why. "She just changed the nutrient mix without any explanation," one scientist complained. "How are we supposed to know what she was thinking?" More reports came in from other worlds. Environmental systems that Dr. Hyun had designed were failing throughout the outer rim. Planets that had been safely terraformed were reverting to hostile environments. Crops were dying, water systems were shutting down, and atmospheric processors were producing toxic gas instead of breathable air. Meanwhile, the supply crisis was getting worse. Trade routes that had run smoothly for decades were collapsing into chaos. Ships were arriving late, cargo was being lost, and prices were rising everywhere. Trader Sunmi had managed most of the independent shipping networks. Unlike the big corporate fleets, she had worked with small traders and family ships, creating flexible supply chains that could adapt to problems quickly. When a trade route was blocked, she would find 10 other ways to get goods where they needed to go. The Council had never liked her methods. She didn't file proper paperwork. She made deals with handshakes instead of contracts, and she paid her captains bonuses for creative solutions. Council administrators called her network disorganized and unreliable, but it had worked. Goods had flowed smoothly throughout the galaxy, small worlds had stayed supplied, and prices had remained stable. Now, with Sunmi gone, the rigid Council trade system was falling apart. When problems arose, there was no one to find creative solutions. Official procedures had to be followed, forms had to be filed, and committees had to meet. By the time decisions were made, the problems had gotten much worse. "Where is our grain shipment?" demanded the governor of Tau Ceti. "Our people are starting to ration food." "The cargo ship developed engine problems," came the reply from Trade Administration. "We have submitted a request for a replacement vessel. It will be processed within 10 business days. 10 days? Our people will be starving by then. I'm sorry, but proper procedures must be followed. We cannot simply reassign cargo ships without proper authorization." In the old days, Trader Sunmi would have gotten a message about the engine problems and had 3 other ships redirected to carry the grain within hours. She knew captains throughout the sector and could call in favors to get emergency supplies where they needed to go. But Sunmi was gone, along with her network of relationships and her ability to make quick decisions. As the 6th month after humanity's departure passed, the galaxy was struggling with problems no one had expected. The Vegan attacks continued, striking without warning and disappearing like ghosts. Environmental systems were failing on dozens of worlds. Trade networks were collapsing, leaving entire planets short of food, medicine, and basic supplies. High Chancellor Morden sat in his office, staring at reports that got worse every day. He had gotten what he wanted. The humans were gone, with their endless questions and their disruptive ideas and their emotional complications. The galaxy was more peaceful now. There were no more heated debates in the council chambers, no more uncomfortable suggestions about changing things that had worked for centuries, no more humans pointing out problems that everyone else preferred to ignore. But peace, Morden was beginning to realize, was not the same as prosperity. It was not the same as security, and it was definitely not the same as happiness. Outside his window, he could see the docking bays where human ships used to arrive daily, bringing trade goods, scientific discoveries, and cultural exchanges. The bays were quieter now, cleaner, more orderly. They were also empty. Morden picked up his communication device and opened a channel to his military command. Commander Zalthor, I need you to pull all of Captain Siak's old training files. Everything he taught us about irregular warfare. Sir, but we determined his methods were unsuitable for Council forces. Yes, Morden said quietly. We did, and now we're paying the price for that determination. As he spoke, another alarm began to sound. The Vegas were attacking again somewhere else, using tactics that a human had tried to teach them years ago. The galaxy was learning a hard lesson about the difference between peace and strength, between quiet and wisdom, between getting what you want and getting what you need. The humans had left quietly just as they had promised. But their absence was becoming louder every day. 1 year after the humans left, the galaxy was falling apart. High Chancellor Morden walked through the corridors of Nexus Prime, trying to avoid the areas where maintenance crews were working around the clock. The great space station was breaking down, and no one knew how to fix it properly. The environmental controls in Section 7 have failed again, reported Chief Engineer Colmack, his mechanical arms clicking with frustration. That's the third time this month. Morden sighed. What's the problem this time? Same as always. The backup systems keep overloading. We fix one problem and 2 more appear. It's like the whole section is fighting against itself. The Chancellor knew why. Engineer Dongsu had redesigned Section 7's environmental systems 5 years ago. The human had taken a mess of outdated equipment and somehow made it all work together. He had used parts from different manufacturers, combined old technology with new innovations, and created solutions that Council engineers called impossible, but they had worked perfectly for 5 years. What did Dongsu do differently? Morden asked. Colmack's mechanical arms drooped. We don't know, sir. His technical reports are all there, but they don't make sense. He would write things like, redirected power flow through secondary manifold to reduce harmonic interference. We don't even know what harmonic interference means in this context. And you can't figure it out? We're trying, but his methods were so strange. He would take damaged components that we would throw away and somehow make them work better than new ones. He called it creative engineering. We called it impossible. The maintenance problems weren't limited to Nexus Prime. Throughout the galaxy, space stations and orbital platforms were experiencing system failures. Engineer Dongsu and his teams had quietly maintained dozens of installations over the years, using techniques that worked but didn't follow standard procedures. Now those stations were breaking down, and no one could fix them the way Dongsu had, but mechanical failures were only part of the problem. The real crisis was political. In the Andromeda sector, 3 species were at war with each other. The Helix, the Spiral Folk, and the Ring Builders had been neighbors for centuries, sharing the same star system and trading peacefully. Now they were destroying each other's colonies and fighting over resources they had shared for generations. I don't understand it, Counselor Vexithara said as she reviewed the reports. The Helix and the Spiral Folk were practically family. They intermarried, shared technology, even celebrated the same holidays. What changed? The answer was simple, but no one wanted to admit it. Ambassador Nyan had changed. The human ambassador had spent years in the Andromeda sector, not as a ruler or judge, but as a friend and mediator. When disputes arose between the species, they would come to her small office on the trade station and explain their problems. She would listen to everyone, ask questions that helped them understand each other better, and somehow find solutions that made everyone happy. She had organized cultural festivals that brought the 3 species together. She had helped arrange marriages between different species, creating families that served as bridges between communities. She had even learned all 3 languages and served as a translator when communication broke down. Most importantly, she had taught the 3 species to see each other as people rather than aliens. But Nayan was gone now, and without her patient mediation, old prejudices were resurging. The Helix began to see the Spiral Folk as strange and threatening. The Spiral Folk decided that the Ring Builders were taking more than their fair share of resources. The Ring Builders concluded that the others couldn't be trusted. Within months, peaceful neighbors had become bitter enemies. Send a mediation team, Morden ordered. The team came back unsuccessful. The council mediators used standard diplomatic procedures, formal negotiations, and official protocols. They treated the dispute as a legal matter to be resolved through proper channels. But this wasn't a legal problem. It was a human problem, requiring human solutions that the council didn't understand. The war in Andromedus was just one of many conflicts erupting throughout the galaxy. On 12 different worlds, species that had lived together peacefully were suddenly fighting. The Council's diplomatic corps was overwhelmed, using formal procedures to address emotional problems. Meanwhile, the military situation was getting desperate. The Vegan Empire had conquered 15 worlds and showed no signs of stopping. Their hit-and-run tactics had completely neutralized the Council's numerical advantage. "We need to adapt," Commander Zalthor reported to the Emergency Military Council. "Our traditional formation fighting doesn't work against these tactics. Then, we'll develop new tactics," declared General Vorthak of the Centaurian Fleet. But developing new tactics was harder than anyone expected. The Council military had been using the same strategies for 1,000 years. They were good strategies, proven in dozens of wars against enemies who fought in predictable ways. The problem was that the Vegas weren't fighting in predictable ways anymore. They were using human tactics, learned from years of observing human war games and training exercises, and the humans had taken their tactical knowledge with them when they left. "What about the training manuals?" suggested Colonel Thexry. "Didn't the humans leave behind their military procedures?" They had, but the manuals were useless without understanding the thinking behind them. Human tactics weren't just about moving ships and firing weapons. They were about psychology, about understanding how enemies thought and felt, about adapting quickly to unexpected situations. Admiral Taywin had tried to explain this during his years as a council advisor. "Fighting isn't just about having bigger guns," he had said. "It's about being smarter, faster, and more flexible than your enemy. It's about making them react to you instead of the other way around." The council officers had nodded politely and ignored him. They preferred their traditional methods, their tested procedures, their predictable results. Now they were learning the cost of that preference. The crisis reached a breaking point when the orbital shipyards above Kepler Prime exploded. The massive industrial complex, which had been building Council warships for 3 centuries, simply came apart in a chain of catastrophic failures. Thousands of workers died. Dozens of ships under construction were destroyed. The Council's ability to replace their military losses was cut in half. "How did this happen?" Morden demanded. The investigation report was devastating. The shipyards had been operating beyond their design limits for months, trying to replace ships lost to the Vegas. Safety systems that engineer Dongsu had installed were being bypassed to increase production speed. Maintenance schedules that he had created were being ignored to save time. The humans always insisted on redundant safety systems, the report noted. Our engineers considered this wasteful and removed many of them to improve efficiency. The removed safety systems would have prevented the explosion. As reports of the disaster spread throughout the galaxy, 3 more species announced their withdrawal from the Galactic Council. They no longer trusted the Council's ability to protect them or maintain basic infrastructure. Morden sat in his office, staring at a map of the galaxy. Red markers showed worlds under vegan control. Yellow markers indicated systems experiencing critical failures. Orange markers marked political conflicts that were spiraling out of control. The map looked like a disease spreading through the galaxy, infecting everything it touched. "Sir?" Councillor Vexithara entered his office, carrying another stack of crisis reports. "How many today?" he asked without looking up. 17 new emergencies, food shortages on 5 worlds, atmospheric processor failures on 3 more, and a complete breakdown of the trade network in the Orion sector. Morden finally looked at her. "How did we survive before the humans came?" Vexithara considered the question seriously. "We didn't have these problems before the humans came, sir. But we also didn't have the solutions the humans provided. We've been living off their innovations for decades without realizing it. And now we're learning what the galaxy looks like without them." Through his office window, Morden could see the stars. Somewhere out there, beyond the edge of the galaxy, the humans were traveling through the dark void between star systems. They had taken their knowledge, their skills, and their solutions with them. They had left quietly, as promised. But their absence was the loudest thing in the galaxy. The Galactic Council was finally getting the peace and order it had always wanted. The question was whether civilization could survive that peace. Outside, another alarm began to sound. Another crisis, another problem that the humans would have solved quietly and efficiently. Now it was just another emergency that no one knew how to handle. 18 months after humanity's departure, the Galactic Council faced a truth that none of them wanted to admit. They were dying. High Chancellor Morden stood before the emergency assembly, looking out at half-empty chambers. Where once 847 species had gathered to debate and govern, now fewer than 400 remained. The others had either been conquered by the Vegan Empire or had withdrawn from the Council in disgust and fear. "We must send expeditions to find them," he announced. "The humans must be brought back." The words tasted like poison in his mouth. A year and a half ago, he had celebrated humanity's departure. Now he was begging for their return. "Chancellor," spoke Councillor Drexmore of the Tau Ceti Alliance, "we don't even know where they went. They could be anywhere in the void between galaxies." "Then we'll search everywhere," Morden replied. "We'll send our fastest ships in every direction. We'll offer them anything they want. Territory, resources, positions of authority, whatever it takes." The first search expedition launched a week later. Captain Yilseth commanded the fastest ship in the Council fleet, equipped with long-range sensors and enough supplies for a 2-year journey. His mission was simple: find the humans and convince them to come home. What he found instead was the full scope of humanity's contributions to galactic civilization. 3 months out from Council space, Captain Yilseth discovered an abandoned human research station orbiting a dead star. The facility was dark and empty, but its computers were still active, protected by automated systems. "Captain," reported his science officer, "you need to see this." The station's databases contained decades of research by Dr. Wu Jin, a human scientist who had studied stellar phenomena and cosmic radiation. His work had seemed purely academic to most council members. Interesting but impractical. But as Yilseth's team studied the files, they realized the truth. Dr. Wu Jin's research had been the foundation for predicting solar flares, cosmic storms, and other space weather events. His early warning systems had been quietly preventing disasters throughout the galaxy for 20 years. "Look at this," the science officer said, pointing to a timeline on the screen. 3 months ago, he predicted a massive solar flare in the Vega system. According to his calculations, it should have hit right about now. They immediately contacted the Vega colonies. The response was grim. "The flare hit 2 days ago," came the reply. 17 agricultural satellites were destroyed. "Our communication network is down. We lost 3 million people to radiation poisoning because we had no warning." Dr. Wu Jin's warning system would have given the colonies 3 weeks to prepare, time enough to evacuate dangerous areas and shield critical infrastructure. But the system had gone offline when he left with the other humans. The search expedition continued deeper into the void, following faint traces of human ships. At each abandoned outpost, they discovered more evidence of humanity's hidden contributions. On a mining station in the Outer Rim, they found the training facilities where Colonel Deho had been preparing Council Special Forces. The human military officer had developed new techniques for asymmetric warfare, teaching elite units how to think creatively and adapt quickly to changing situations. "His training programs created our most effective soldiers," reported the expedition's military observer. "The Ghost Battalion, the Shadow Corps, the Lightning Strike teams, they were all trained using his methods. But Colonel Deho was gone, and his training programs had been discontinued as too irregular for proper military forces. The special forces units he had created were being destroyed by the Vegas because no one remained who understood the unconventional tactics he had taught them." Further out, the expedition found traces of Captain Jiyo's exploration ships. The human explorer had been mapping the dangerous regions beyond Council space, identifying new worlds and cataloging potential threats. Her work had seemed like expensive adventure to most Council members. Now they realized she had been providing critical intelligence about Vegan Empire movements for years. Her exploration data had shown the buildup of vegan forces long before the attacks began. But her warnings had been dismissed as human paranoia. "She knew," Captain Yilseth said, staring at navigation charts that clearly showed vegan military preparations dating back 5 years. Captain Jiyo knew they were planning to attack. "She tried to warn us, but the Council had ignored her warnings, just as they had ignored so many human contributions. The search expeditions found evidence of human involvement in every aspect of galactic civilization. Medical research that had prevented plagues, agricultural techniques that had fed billions, engineering solutions that had kept aging infrastructure functional, diplomatic initiatives that had prevented wars. All of it was gone now, taken away when humanity left. But the most shocking discovery came from intercepted Vegan communications. The enemy's internal messages revealed the true scope of their strategy. Phase 1 complete. Red 1 intercepted transmission. Human departure confirmed. All strategic advisors removed from Council forces. Window of opportunity is open. The Vegas had been waiting for the humans to leave. They planned this, Yilseth reported back to the Council. The Vegan Empire has been preparing for invasion for years. But they waited until humanity was gone. They knew the humans were the real threat to their expansion. The transmission log showed detailed vegan intelligence about human military advisors, human diplomats, and human scientists. The enemy had been studying humanity carefully, recognizing them as the most dangerous obstacle to vegan conquest. Admiral Taywin's irregular warfare tactics were specifically identified as a primary threat, the intelligence report continued. Colonel Daho's Special Forces training was classified as unacceptable risk to invasion success. Ambassador Jiwan's diplomatic network was labeled critical target for elimination, but the Vegas hadn't needed to eliminate the humans. The Council had done that for them by making human life so uncomfortable that they chose to leave voluntarily. After 6 months of searching, the expeditions had found no trace of the human fleet. They had discovered dozens of abandoned outposts, empty research stations, and deserted colonies, but no sign of where the humans had actually gone. "It's like they vanished completely," reported Captain Yilseth. "We've followed their trail to the edge of the galaxy and beyond, but then it just disappears." The truth was becoming clear. Humanity didn't want to be found. Back on Nexus Prime, the situation was deteriorating rapidly. The Vegan Empire now controlled a third of the galaxy. Critical infrastructure was failing on dozens of worlds. Political conflicts were tearing apart species that had lived in peace for centuries. And now a new crisis was emerging. "Sir," reported the Medical Council, "we have a problem. A big problem." The Helix Plague had appeared in 3 star systems simultaneously. It was a viral infection that attacked the nervous systems of most Council species, causing paralysis and death within days. Millions were already infected, and the disease was spreading faster than anyone could track. "How bad is it?" Morden asked. "Without immediate intervention, we're looking at the extinction of at least 12 species and the collapse of modern medicine throughout the Outer Rim." But there was hope. Deep in the medical archives, they found research by Dr. Wu Jin and his medical team. Years earlier, they had identified the Helix virus and developed both vaccines and treatments for it. "The humans knew about this plague?" Morden asked. "They discovered it in their deep space surveys, sir. They spent 3 years developing countermeasures just in case it ever appeared in populated areas." "Where are the countermeasures?" "Gone, sir. The humans took all their medical research with them when they left. We have the basic data, but not the manufacturing processes or treatment protocols." Once again, humanity had quietly prepared for a crisis that no one else had even imagined, and once again their preparation was now beyond reach. As the plague spread and the Vegan advance continued, High Chancellor Morden made a decision that would have been unthinkable 2 years earlier. "Prepare a galaxy-wide broadcast," he ordered. "All frequencies, all languages, maximum range." "Sir? What message should we send?" Morden straightened his formal robes and walked to the communication chamber. It was time to do something that no chancellor had ever done in the Council's 1,000-year history. It was time to apologize. The broadcast would reach across the galaxy and beyond, carrying a message of regret, admission of failure, and desperate plea for help. It would be heard by allies and enemies alike, a public acknowledgement of weakness that would damage the Council's reputation forever. But reputation meant nothing if there was no civilization left to have a reputation. Somewhere, in the dark void between galaxies, the humans would hear his words. The question was whether they would choose to answer. The galaxy was dying without them. The only question was whether they cared enough to save it. 2 years after humanity left, High Chancellor Morden stood alone in the Council chamber, preparing to do something that had never been done before in galactic history. The Great Hall was nearly empty now, with representatives from less than 300 worlds. The rest were either conquered, destroyed, or had simply given up on the Council entirely. Begin galaxy-wide transmission, he ordered. The communication systems activated, sending his signal across every frequency, to every world, to every ship in space. The message would travel beyond the galaxy's edge, reaching into the dark void where humanity had disappeared. Morden looked directly into the camera, his voice heavy with exhaustion and regret. To the humans, wherever you are, I speak for what remains of the Galactic Council. 2 years ago, we watched you leave without understanding what we were losing. Today, I stand before you with the truth we were too proud to see then. He paused, gathering strength for words that felt like swallowing glass. We were wrong. About everything. We called your questions disruptive when they were insightful. We called your methods chaotic when they were innovative. We called your emotions weakness when they were your greatest strength. Across the galaxy, the few remaining worlds listened to their leader's unprecedented confession. You held our civilization together in ways we never recognized. You solved problems we didn't even know we had. You prevented disasters we never saw coming. And we repaid your service with criticism, resistance, and ultimately, rejection. The broadcast continued for 20 minutes, as Morden detailed humanity's contributions and the Council's failures. He spoke of collapsed infrastructure, failed diplomacy, military defeats, and the plague that was now spreading unchecked through the outer rim. We are dying without you, he concluded, not just failing but truly dying as a civilization. If you can hear this message, if any part of you still cares about the galaxy you once called home, please consider returning. We will give you anything you ask for. Territory, authority, resources. Name your price. The transmission ended and Morden collapsed into his chair. All he could do now was wait. The response came 3 days later. It was not what anyone expected. A single data packet appeared in the Council's communication systems. Origin unknown. It contained no threats, no demands, no anger. Just coordinates to a star system on the galactic rim and a simple message. If you truly wish to learn, send a small delegation to these coordinates. Come alone, unarmed, and with open minds. The message was signed by Admiral Taiwan. Morden personally led the delegation, along with Counselor Vexithera and a handful of other leaders. Their ship traveled for 2 weeks to reach the coordinates, an unremarkable system with a single rocky planet orbiting a dying red star. But as they approached, sensors detected something impossible, a massive structure on the planet's surface, clearly artificial and definitely not there in any previous surveys. It's a city, whispered the ship's pilot, or something like a city. They landed on a prepared landing pad and were met by a single figure in a simple environmental suit. The person removed their helmet, revealing a familiar face. Captain Minho smiled at them with the same calm expression he had worn when commanding the human exodus 2 years earlier. Chancellor, he said, in perfect council standard. You came. I wasn't sure you would, Captain Minho, Morden replied, barely controlling his emotions. Where are your people? Where are the human fleets? Safe, Minho replied simply. Come, there is much to show you. He led them through the strange city, which seemed to be half building and half garden. Human families worked in laboratories and workshops while their children played in parks that shouldn't have been able to exist under the red star's dim light. How is this possible? Vexthara asked. This world was dead when we surveyed it. Dr. Hyun's terraforming techniques, Minho explained. We've had 2 years to perfect them. This entire world is now a testing ground for environmental restoration. They passed workshops where engineers were building devices that combined familiar technology in new ways, laboratories where scientists studied samples from dozens of worlds, and schools where human children learned alongside young beings from species Morden didn't recognize. You found other civilizations out here? He asked. We found refugees, Minho replied. Species fleeing the Vegan advance, the Council's collapse, or other disasters. We helped them and they joined us. We've become something new. In the central plaza, they found what they were looking for. A massive data center housed thousands of storage units, each one containing information that glowed softly in the dim light. Everything is here, Minho said. Dr. Wujin's medical research, including the Helix plague countermeasures you need. Engineer Dongsu's maintenance protocols for your failing infrastructure. Colonel Daeho's training manuals for asymmetric warfare. Ambassador Nayan's diplomatic techniques for conflict resolution. Morden stared at the vast collection of knowledge. You'll give this to us? We're not giving you anything, Minho said firmly. We're offering to teach you. There's a difference. He led them to a smaller chamber where holographic displays showed detailed technical diagrams and training materials. Every solution here comes with complete explanations of why it works, how it was developed, and what principles govern its operation. You won't just get our answers. You'll understand the thinking behind them. Vexithara approached one of the displays showing atmospheric recycling procedures. The information was incredibly detailed, with step-by-step reasoning for each decision and cross-references to the scientific principles involved. This will take years to fully understand, she said. Yes, Minho agreed. That's the point. Quick fixes and copied solutions are temporary. Understanding is permanent. But people are dying, Morden protested. The plague, the infrastructure failures, the wars. We need help now, and you'll get it, Minho said. Emergency medical supplies are already being prepared. Our engineers can provide temporary fixes for your critical systems. Our military advisors can help you counter the Vegan tactics. He paused, looking directly at Morden. But this time you'll work alongside us as partners, not just take our solutions and dismiss our methods. You'll learn why these approaches work, so you can develop your own innovations in the future. Over the next 3 days, the delegation learned the full scope of what humanity had built in exile. They had created not just a new home, but a new kind of civilization. One based on cooperation rather than hierarchy, on understanding rather than authority, on solving problems together rather than following ancient procedures. Why did you really leave? Vexithara asked on their last day. Minho considered the question carefully. Because we realized something important. The galaxy didn't need humans to solve its problems. It needed to learn how to solve problems the way humans do, with creativity, flexibility, and the willingness to try new things. And you couldn't teach us that while you were part of the council? No, he said sadly. You saw us as a source of solutions, not as teachers of methods. As long as we were there to fix things, you had no reason to learn how to fix them yourselves. And now you've experienced what happens when no one knows how to solve problems creatively. You've learned that having the right answers isn't the same as understanding how to find answers. The delegation returned to council space with data crystals containing temporary solutions to their most critical problems, but more importantly, with the beginning of a new understanding. The Helix plague was contained using human-designed treatments, but council doctors learned the principles behind vaccine development. Failing infrastructure was repaired using human techniques, but council engineers learned to see systems as interconnected wholes rather than isolated components. Most importantly, the galaxy began to change its approach to problems. Instead of following rigid procedures, councils learned to ask better questions. Instead of rejecting unusual ideas, they learned to test them. Instead of preferring predictable results, they learned to value adaptive solutions. The vegan empire found their expansion suddenly much more difficult as council forces began using truly flexible tactics for the first time. Political conflicts were resolved through new diplomatic approaches that addressed underlying causes rather than just symptoms. It wasn't fast, and it wasn't easy. Many council members resisted the changes, preferring the old ways of doing things, but the alternative was extinction, and that motivated even the most stubborn officials to try new approaches. From their new home in the void, humanity watched the galaxy slowly transform. They provided guidance when asked, assistance during emergencies, and knowledge for those willing to learn, but they never returned to their old role as invisible problem solvers. Will we ever go back? Asked a young human colonist born after the Exodus. Captain Minho, now an old man, looked out at the stars of their distant galaxy. Perhaps someday, when they no longer need us to solve their problems but want us as partners in exploring new ones. In the council chambers on Nexus Prime, High Chancellor Morden addressed a galaxy that was slowly healing. The Great Hall was fuller now, with representatives learning to work together in ways their predecessors never had. Today, he announced, we face challenges that would have destroyed the old council. But we are no longer the civilization that let humanity leave in silence.